Wicked. The 2003 smash hit Broadway musical finally came to the big screen this year after first debuting on Broadway over 20 years ago. What about this musical is so beloved that it's still running on Broadway and popular even until today? We're going to take a look at the lore of Wicked and talk about how a gritty retelling of The Wizard of Oz was reimagined into a hit Broadway musical, Wicked, the untold story of the Witches of Oz. Hello, it's Felee. So this is a video series I wanted to do on my channel, diving into the lore of The Wizard of Oz and Wicked because of the Wicked movie coming out this year. And I'm really excited for this one because I'm a bigger Wicked fan than a Wizard of Oz fan. Wicked was one of the first musicals I saw live, and it was a big part of my musical theater obsession. Any musical theater fan will tell you they have strong feelings about Wicked. It's one of the most popular musicals of the 21st century, with two beloved lead characters, Glinda and Elphaba, and iconic songs like Popular and Defying Gravity. It's influenced not just musical theater, but broader pop culture. And its original Broadway cast leads, Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel, have become Broadway legends and continued to kill it, being in countless popular movies and TV shows. In my previous video, I looked at the production history behind The Wizard of Oz 1939 film, Disney's influence, and the golden age of Hollywood, and all of the production problems that the film had, so please check out that video if you haven't. In this video, I wanted to talk about Wicked, the book and musical, and we're going to talk about changes they made to the book for the musical, behind-the-scenes lore, creative decisions, songs, and more. And after this, I wanted to make another video looking into the Wicked movie production and the press tour and all that. So please hold space for that and subscribe if you would like to see that. I want to give some quick disclaimers before I start this video. I do feel like I say Galinda and Glinda a lot in this video, and I kind of switch between the two. I'm sorry. And also, I do like to say adaptation instead of adaptation. I know people have problems with this, but like the Wicked musical movie adaptation sounds right to me, but I don't want to debate linguistics. I just want to talk about Wicked. And I do want to say this video is going to include my opinions on Wicked. So let's start off with The Wizard of Oz movie coming out and becoming one of the most successful movies of all time. It's considered to be the most watched film in all of history, and after The Wizard of Oz's movie success, the original series also entered the public domain in 1956, so people were welcome to make their own interpretations of The Wizard of Oz. Although, keep in mind, elements of the 1939 film of The Wizard of Oz are still copyright protected content, so things that are unique to the film were not as easily able to be used, but the film follows the book very closely, so it's almost indistinguishable. But some of the most well-known changes they made for the movie was giving the witch green skin, which wasn't present in the original book, and the Wicked Witch of the East having ruby slippers rather than silver shoes in the original book. And one author who ventured to reimagine the story of The Wizard of Oz was Gregory Maguire in his novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, published in 1995, which would go on to be the basis for the 2003 Broadway musical. The Wicked book interprets Oz rather than this happy, beautiful fairy tale place as this gritty society with racial issues, political upheaval, and a dictator, the Wizard of Oz. The book also really dives into the sex lives of the Wizard of Oz characters, if that's something you wanted out of the Wizard of Oz story. So it's almost a little shocking that Stephen Schwartz was like, I want to make a musical out of this, but I think he mainly heard backstory of the Wicked Witch of the West and was like, I want that. I don't think he really read the book before he wanted the rights for it. So first, let's do a mini Wicked book report, and then we can talk about the more fun part, which is the musical. So Wicked, the book. The start of the book cuts to the middle of the Wizard of Oz story when the Scarecrow, Lion, and Tin Man are walking down the yellow brick road with Dorothy to see the Wizard of Oz. But this time, rather than being in the perspective of the heroes, we are seeing it through the perspective of the Wicked Witch of the West, who is observing them as they tell crass jokes about her, such as joking that she may be transgender or into women or a mistress. But Elphaba is watching, biding her time. So Elphaba is the main character who goes on to be the Wicked Witch of the West. Her name is Elphaba as an homage to L. Frank Baum, LFB, Elphaba, or Elfie if you're familiar, and the book centers around Elphaba throughout her entire life until her ultimate demise that we see in The Wizard of Oz. And I've seen a lot of discussion online where people consider the Wicked book to be a prequel to the movies rather than L. Frank Baum's book, just because of how L. Frank Baum's book series had elements later on in the story that would contradict things that happen in the Wicked universe. But even Wicked the musical and The Wizard of Oz movie side by side don't really fully match up. So I think you need to change some things that happen in the Wizard of Oz plot to fully make the story make sense. But the second half of the book connects back to the Wizard of Oz a lot more than the first half, because the first half is just focusing on Elphaba's younger years and college years. So after this little vignette, we flash back to Elphaba's birth. So for the first couple chapters, we are spending time with Elphaba's mother, Malena, who's a munchkin, but she's average height because upper-class munchkins are taller than the lower-class ones. We're also going to learn a lot about the geopolitics of Oz, I guess. So the land of Oz is mainly split into 4 regions: Gillikin, Winky, Quadling, and Munchkin Country. Gillikin and Munchkin Country are the 2 main places that the Wizard of Oz and Wicked take place in. They are the richer regions, and there's an emerald mine between the 2 of them that get emeralds for the Emerald City, which is in the middle and the richest of all, where the Wizard of Oz lives. And the map of the Land of Oz is actually the curtain for Wicked, the stage musical that's seen before the show starts. And Elphaba is born in Rush Margins in Munchkin Land, and her father is a unionist minister, Frexper. Unionism is the main religion that's practiced in Munchkin Land and Gillikin, and they worship the unnamed god. Her mother, Malena, is an heiress to a well-respected Munchkin family, the Throp family, and the night that Elphaba is born, the clock dragon comes to their town. It's this giant stage with a dragon on top. It's more like a theater with a dragon. And the dragon clock shows these puppets doing graphic acts on his stage, and all of the people in Munchkin Land are enthralled by this. Frex is upset because he feels like what the dragon is doing is in line with the pleasure faith, another religion, rather than unionism. So he starts to try to get the people to stop watching the dragon clock, but the dragon has told everyone to kill him and his wife. I think the dragon telepathically communicates to people. And later, while they're on a manhunt to kill Frex and Malena, Malena gives birth to Elphaba inside of the dragon clock. The ladies delivering her are disgusted by her because she's born green, and right away there's a connection between the dragon and Elphaba. The dragon even calls Elphaba a little dragon. It's not really a clock, it doesn't have the correct time. It's a tick-tock creature, which is another race of creatures in Oz that I assume are mechanical, which then is transformed into the dragon on the real stage of Wicked on Broadway. So Elphaba's born green, and she also has really sharp teeth and bites off one of the lady's fingers. And in the earlier chapters, there's a lot of talk about Elphaba's sex and gender. The ladies that deliver her, Elphaba's mom, and even the Tin Man make jokes that she may be trans or intersex. And later on, Malena also questions Elphaba's gender. She says, "It was a she. It was a her. Malena practiced conversions in her thinking when she was alone. The twitching, unhappy bundle was not male. It was not neutered. It was female. It slept looking like a heap of cabbage leaves, washed and left to drain on the table." And from this quote, you can also see Malena's having trouble connecting with her daughter, and she's having trouble seeing her as a normal baby and not a monster. But I do question what the author's trying to tell us about Elphaba with her gender. Is this supposed to be a trans allegory? Are we supposed to interpret it a different way? I do think Elphaba's also represented as anything bad or taboo in society. The Tin Man is joking that she's a mistress or trans or intersex or into women. These are just different things that could be perceived as wicked by society, and we know the overall message of the book is what's good versus wicked. But I am curious about what other people's interpretations of this are, because I don't really know what to make of it. I think with the Wicked musical, you could make queer interpretations of it. At first, I thought maybe this is transphobic, but I did look up the author, and he is a gay man, and he was one of the first men to get legally married. So I don't think it's transphobic, but it was also 1995, so maybe it was. After Elphaba's born, Malena becomes an alcoholic. She's also constantly cheating on her husband while he's away. She soon becomes pregnant with her second child, and she doesn't know if the father is Turtleheart or Frex. So Turtleheart is this quadling glassblower who comes to visit them, and he becomes lovers to both Frex and Malena, although I don't think they know about each other's situation, but they become very close, and he becomes an important part of the family, and Malena becomes pregnant with her second child, Nessa Rose, who is born without arms. The night that Nessa Rose is born, Turtleheart is sacrificed to end the Munchkin Land famine, and Malena starts to become more devout in her religious beliefs because she feels like God is punishing her, having one of her daughters be born green and the other one is born without arms, for all of her infidelity. Malena and Frex go to Quadling Country to preach unionism to the Quadlings. This is pretty rare for Munchkins because even when they were in Munchkin Land and had Turtleheart staying with them, it lowered their reputation, and people made fun of Elphaba for living with the Quadling. So, in Elphaba's early childhood, after Nessa's born, they travel around Quadling country. When Elphaba's 8, Milena has her third child, Shell. So, Nessa Rose and Elphaba have a third sibling, but he's not really that important because he's not in the musical. But rather than their mom dying during childbirth with Nessa, she actually dies in childbirth, delivering Shell. And the name Shell is also an homage to Turtleheart. Their brother Shell goes on to become an important part of the Wicked book series because there are 4 books in the Wicked series. I believe he becomes the ruler of Oz after the Wizard of Oz is removed at the end of this book. But then we cut to Glinda entering Shiz University. And the whole first fourth of the book about Elphaba's parents and her childhood are basically compressed into a couple verses in the opening number of Wicked, No One Mourns the Wicked. We switch to Glinda's perspective, enthusiastically starting her first year at Shiz. And through a series of unfortunate events, she's paired with Elphaba as a roommate. Glinda is very selfish and only looking out for herself and advancing her own social standing. She dreams of becoming a sorceress, and after months of Glinda and Elphaba ignoring each other, they one night start to talk about religion, as Elphaba's father is a unionism minister. And Elphaba knocks over a hat box, and Glinda goats her into trying on this hat. And once she tries it on, Glinda realizes her beauty, and then they have a existential bonding conversation about the differences between good and evil. They also live with a live-in chaperone, Alma Clutch. Basically, all women in their society have chaperones. But while they're at school, they meet some different important characters like Dr. Dillamond, who is one of their professors and also a goat. He discusses that there's bans being put on animal mobility by the Wizard of Oz. Also, a Munchkin boy, Bach, who was a childhood friend of Elphaba when they used to live together in Munchkinland, starts to befriend Elphaba again. And then we switch to Bach's POV. So Bach is in love with Glinda, and he's watching girls change through the dorm windows, and he's hoping to watch Glinda change. A lot of weird sexual stuff in this book, but I'm mostly glossing over that. Elphaba tries to set up Bach and Glinda, but Glinda wants to be with someone higher class and Gilliganese. And in their school, women and animals are not allowed to use the library, and when Dr. Dillamond and Elphaba want to do research on the animal oppression and how animals gained their power of speech, she asks Bach to do the research and check out the books for them. And she starts to form this research friend group with Bach, Crope, Tibbet, and Averick. Averick basically has the personality of Musical Fiero. He's like the carefree party boy. Glinda continuously tries to reject Bach. Bach still kisses her. Soon after this, after they come back from summer vacation, Bach starts to think he has a breakthrough in his research and wants to show this scroll to Dr. Dillamond. But shortly after this, Dr. Dillamond is murdered on campus, and the only person who sees what happened in the murder is Alma Clutch. But Alma Clutch is losing touch on reality. When Glinda first enrolled in Shiz and she was trying to get out of having a roommate, she told Madame Morrible that Alma Clutch has a problem where she's unable to tell between living creatures and inanimate objects. This was a lie that Glinda made up, but then Alma Clutch starts to actually develop that condition. Glinda thinks that it's her inherent sorcery that's causing this, but Elphaba thinks that it's Madame Morrible's doing. So when Alma Clutch is on her deathbed, Glinda and Elphaba try to ask her what happened to Dr. Dillamond because she saw his murder, but she passes away before she can really say anything. And when they go into the next year of school, when animals are no longer permitted to teach, the women's college and the men's college start to take co-ed classes together because prior to this they were separated, but because they no longer have as much staff with the animals gone, they make the school co-ed. And one of the new teachers is Dr. Nick-Nick, who has an animal cub trapped in a cage that they're doing experiments on. Elphaba and some of the other students are upset by how they're treating this cub. Some of the girls in the class take the cub and release him. And some other students are enrolling in Shiz. Nessa Rose, Elphaba's sister. Nessa Rose is chaperoned by a nanny because she needs assistance with walking and balance. She's also a very devout unionist, like their father. Some of the students find this kind of annoying, but similar to Elphaba, Nessa Rose has been rejected from society and most people are not super kind to her. And while they're at school, Nessa receives a package from their father that has these beautiful jeweled handmade shoes. Elphaba's immediately jealous of this. And another student that joins Shiz is Fiero, who is a Winky Prince. He has dark skin and these diamond blue tattoo markings. Because he's from a more tribal area, all of the students kind of are weirded out by him. Like he explains that he was married when he was 7, but he won't see his bride until their 20s and things like that. But they soon invite him into their friend group and they push all of the past drama aside and they make this charmed circle friend friend group with Galinda, Elphaba, Bach, Averick, Fiero, Shen, Crope, Tibbet, Nessa, and Fanny. And while they're out one night, they start talking about singing, and it's mentioned that Elphaba has a great singing voice, and she sings them a song. I believe you're supposed to interpret that the song she's singing is Over the Rainbow. This is from Bach's POV. He says, Elphaba made up a little song on the spot, a song of longing and otherness, of far away and future days. Strangers closed their eyes to listen. Bach did too. Elphaba had no K voice. He saw the imaginary place she conjured up, a land where injustice and common cruelties in despotic rule and the beggaring fist of drought didn't work together to hold everyone by the neck. No, he wasn't giving her credit. Elphaba had a good voice. It was controlled and feeling and not histrionic. He listened through to the end, and the song faded into the hush of the respectful pub. Later, he thought, the melody faded like a rainbow after a storm, or like the winds calming down. And that message is pretty similar to what Dorothy sings in Over the Rainbow. Madame Morrible then gathers Galinda, Elphaba, and Nessa Rose to talk to them about what they can do after graduation, and it turns out that Madame Morrible has plans for them to all become government adepts, so she wants each of the ladies to foresee and rule over a certain area and then basically like report back to the government and all be under like a controlled system to basically take over all of Oz, so Madame Morrible can keep control over it. And she tells the girls like to think about it until graduation, but they're unable to talk to each other about it because she curses them with this spell, so they can't talk about it. And this night, Averick and Bach want to go to the Philosophers Club, which is basically this like crazy club brothel thing. Elphaba talks Galinda and Nessa Rose out of going, but Averick, Fiero, Shen, Crope, Tibbet, and Bach and Fanny all go to the Philosophers Club, and they basically have like this crazy orgy situation there, and Tibbet is brought on stage and has relations with this tiger on stage, and everyone watches. A description of the Philosophers Club is, they danced. The crowd was the most mixed Bach had seen in some time. There were animals, humans, dwarfs, elves, and several TikTok things of incomplete or experimental gender. A squadron of well-built blonde boys circulated with tumblers of Rogut squash wine, which the friends drank because it was free. Elphaba and Galinda go to the Emerald City. Galinda doesn't really like the Emerald City and finds it like fake, but they go to see the wizard. Elphaba wants to tell him of Dr. Dillamond's work, but the wizard is super dismissive of Dr. Dillamond and the animal rights problems, and he's basically like, the animals are undignified and stupid and I'm not going to do anything for them. But Elphaba tries to plead their case, and after they talk to the wizard, Elphaba starts to realize that the wizard and Madame Morrible are working together, and she doesn't want to go back to Shiz to be instructed by Madame Morrible because she doesn't trust her. Elphaba asks Galinda to go back to Shiz, and she's basically going to go off on her own. Galinda doesn't want Elphaba to go. She cries and they kiss twice, and then Elphaba disappears. And then 3 years later, all of the students at Shiz have graduated, and Fiero is walking around the cloister of St. Galinda, which is no relation to Galinda, the character. She's just a saint named Galinda. But when Fiero's at the convent, he sees that Elphaba actually lives there, and he starts to try to befriend and reconnect with Elphaba. He now has 3 children with his wife, but when he sees Elphaba, he wants to start a romantic relationship with her, so they have this passionate, explicit love affair. And we may not know the answer to, is your pussy green, but we do know the answer to what color her hair is, which Fiero says it's more purple than black. I don't know if we need to know this, but basically they have this passionate love affair in secret. And one day, while he's in town, he runs into Galinda there, and they haven't seen each other since graduation, and they start to catch up, but Fiero wants to keep his distance. Galinda asks about Elphaba and if he's seen her, but he lies. At this point, Galinda is married to a wealthy businessman, and she's been traveling around doing goodwill for the community to help her husband get business deals. And Fiero learns that Elphaba is part of the rebellion, and she has plans to kill Madame Morrible. They tell each other that they love each other, and while she's in the city and Madame Morrible is there, she plans to kill her, but then a group of school children come out into the area where Madame Morrible is, and Elphaba can't go through with killing her with all the kids present and probably maybe also hurting them. Fiero's watching Elphaba, and then he loses her, so he decides to go back to her house. But when Fiero gets there, the wizard forces get to him, and he's never heard from again. And then we skip about another 7 years. Elphaba is around 30. She's traveling to the Vicus to visit Fiero's widow. She's now accompanied by this mysterious child, Lear, and while on the trip, she finds this baby monkey, Chissery, and she starts to try to teach Chissery how to speak, and she also does experiments on him to give him wings. So after she gets to see Fiero's widow, Surima, she spends time with their family and their children and her sisters at the castle. She tries to talk to Sarima about what happened to Fiyero, but she really doesn't want to talk about it. But she does get information about how Fiero's body was never found. Sarima actually thinks that Fiyero was having an affair with Galinda because he mentioned in the past about how she's one of the most beautiful people he'd ever seen, and Galinda has this huge reputation for being one of the most beautiful people in Oz. Sarima and her family theorize that Galinda's husband sent a hit out on the man that she was having an affair with, and that's what killed Fiyero. And while she's there, the family gives Elphaba the Grimri, which is this magical spell book, but they're all unable to read it. Elphaba can sometimes read it, but the pages are always moving and changing, so it's hard for her to read. And Elphaba explains what she sees in the Grimri, and it's horrible spells and methods for poisoning water and breeding a docile population and different torture and weapons, and just lots of horrible things. And while she's at their family castle, Elphaba and Nessa Rose's old nanny comes to visit her. While talking to Nanny, she learns a lot of her family's secrets, and her nanny asks her what her relationship with Lear is and if that's her son. And actually, Elphaba's unsure about if Lear is her son. She tells this story about when she first arrived at this mortuary, that she was taken in and in a coma for over a year, and she believes that she may have possibly delivered a baby during the time she was unconscious, which would have made the baby Fiero's. So she thinks that it might be her and Fiero's child, but when she woke up, she was tending to abandoned babies and the elderly, and she had no particular maternal feelings over Lear. She just saw him as one of the other abandoned children she was taking care of. But when she left, they told her it was on the condition that she had to bring Lear with her, which I think started her questioning if Lear was actually her child. But while they've been on this trip to the Vicus, she's been having more maternal instincts over him, but she kind of doesn't like that part of herself. Her nanny tells her lots of information about Milena and her father. She tells Elphaba about her mom's affairs and how her mother sent her to find this special cure to hopefully not have her next baby be born green. But the nanny thinks that these cause Nessa Rose's conditions. She also shares with Elphaba more about Turtleheart, but she decides not to tell Elphaba about how her mom fell into a depression after she was born and keeps that to herself. She also explains why her mother was so against having daughters and really wanted sons was because she didn't like the life she grew up in being in the Throp family, and she didn't want to confine her daughters to the same life that she had to live. Elphaba also learns from her nanny what Nessa Rose is doing and learns that Nessa Rose has actually been able to walk with the power of her shoes and has actually been ruling over Munchkinland as their mayor. Elphaba decides to visit Nessa in Munchkinland and see how Nessa's ruling over them. She does feel like Nessa is pushing religion on Munchkinland too much. Nessa asks Elphaba to join her in ruling Munchkinland together, and like she can baptize her and stuff, but Elphaba of course can't get wet. Water burns her. Every time she's cried, we've heard this. She's also been avoiding rain, so she says she can't get baptized and she doesn't want to work with Nessa. And while she's there, she sees Nessa Rose do some magic and enchant an axe of this woodcutter. Elphaba also wonders if Nessa Rose took Madame Morrible's deal to become an adept because of her magical powers, so she thinks she might be a pawn for the wizard and Madame Morrible. So Elphaba leaves Nessa there in Munchkinland, and we cut to 7 years later. A twister with a house falls on her, and Dorothy arrives in Munchkinland. Elphaba goes to Munchkinland to pay respects to her sister, and while she's there, she runs into Glinda. Elphaba decides to confront Galinda about the Fiyero-Galinda affair rumor, and Galinda denies this, and she also says she wouldn't be with someone who's dark-skinned like Fiyero, and Elphaba realizes that Galinda's gone back to her shallow ways before they met in Shiz, because during Shiz, she went on a transformation, but it seems like she's reverted back to the person she was. Elphaba really wanted the shoes, and she questions what happened to them, and Galinda says that she gave them to the girl who fell from the sky, Dorothy, and told Dorothy to go see the Wizard of Oz. Elphaba feels like she deserves the shoes, but Galinda says that she was the one looking after Nessa after Elphaba disappeared, and she also enchanted the shoes, so she doesn't think Elphaba deserves them. But since Dorothy is headed to the wizard, Elphaba fears that the wizard's going to take the shoes from Dorothy and then somehow use the magic of the shoes for the reunification of bringing Munchkinland back into Oz, which they don't want because they don't want Munchkinland to be under Oz's rule. Galinda and Elphaba see each other for the last time. Both women averted their eyes and hurried their feet along their opposite ways. For the witch, the sky was a huge boulder pressing down on her. For Galinda, it was much the same. But Galinda wheeled about and cried out, "Oh, Elfie!" The witch did not turn. They never saw each other again. So the wizard comes to confront Elphaba, and the wizard tells Elphaba that Sarima and her whole family has been killed by him, and Nor, the last surviving daughter of Sarima and Fiyero, is taken as a prisoner to the wizard. Elphaba learns that because of her rejecting Madame Morrible's offer in college, the wizard has been looking after her since then. The wizard also tells her that Madame Morrible has a talent for breaking girls to force them to be part of this government operation. But Elphaba really wants to find a way to save Nor, so she proposes that she'll trade the Grimri or a page of the Grimri for Nor because he's interested in it, but she plans to trick him. But she doesn't know how to go about this. She realizes that she has to kill Madame Morrible, so she goes back to Shiz and visits her. But when she finds Madame Morrible, she's already dead, but she decides to bludgeon her corpse anyway. And she basically wants credit for killing Madame Morrible, so she goes to visit Averick and tells his family that she killed Madame Morrible. And she meets this mysterious dwarf who tells her that she's half from Oz and half another thing. And he brings out the time dragon, and the time dragon shows her this play of her parents' life. She learns about her conception, learning that her father is actually this mysterious traveler who gives this green bottle to Milena. It says, Milena at home yawned and waited and teased her pretty hair. Along came a man who the witch could not identify at first. He had a small black bag, and from it he extracted a green glass bottle. He gave it to Milena to drink, and when she had, she fell into his arms, either stupefied and drunk as the witch was tonight, or liberated. It wasn't clear. The traveler and Milena made love in the etc., 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 etc. But then the dragon shows her that the mysterious man left on a balloon, and she immediately realizes that her father is the wizard. She at first is in denial about this, but then realizes that it must be true. And she's given this green elixir bottle from the dwarf and goes back home. She does take the elixir, and she thinks that she potentially might think Fiyero is still alive. She talks to Lear. Lear does know some information about Dorothy and the team she's assembled. They went to the wizard for a heart, a brain, courage, and for Dorothy to go home. But the wizard wouldn't grant them their wishes unless they came to kill Elphaba because she's a murderer for killing Madame Morrible. So she knows the rumors of her killing Madame Morrible have spread. She thought the scarecrow was a disguise and it might be Fiyero coming back to her. So she sends her bees to attack the group, but all they find in the scarecrow is straw. She also finds out that the lion is the same lion that Dr. Nick-Nick was doing experiments on. Dorothy comes to Elphaba's house and Lear and Dorothy talk. Elphaba invites Dorothy in and feeds her a meal, but she starts to accuse her of all these different things, like why she stole the shoes, if she's actually an adept along with Galinda and Nessa, and if she has some ulterior motive. And she also confronts Dorothy about coming there to kill her, but Dorothy says she was just there to apologize for killing her sister, and she didn't mean for any of this to happen. Elphaba tries to get the shoes from Dorothy, but Dorothy says she's been unable to take them off for days, and she believes that Galinda enchanted them to have them stay on. Elphaba then sets her broom on fire, and while they're fighting, she accidentally catches her skirt and clothes on fire, and Dorothy throws the bucket of water over her to actually save her life, she thinks, but she doesn't know that Elphaba has an allergy with water. So Elphaba unfortunately dies there while Dorothy was trying to save her. Dorothy returns to the wizard with the Tin Man, Scarecrow, Lion, and Lear. Dorothy shows the wizard her broom and the green elixir bottle. The wizard realizes what he's done and how he's killed his own daughter and flees out of Oz from his balloon. This was just a few hours before the palace was going to revolt and execute him without a trial. It's unclear if Dorothy is still in Oz or what happened to her, but Lear travels to the Emerald City in hopes of finding his half-sister Nor, Fiyero and Sarima's daughter. Everyone celebrates the Wicked Witch of the West's death. Galinda has a strange feeling that night and leaves out a candle, and that's the end of the story.
So let's talk about Wicked then becoming a musical. Stephen Schwartz, the popular and well-respected lyricist and composer who has won 3 Academy Awards and 3 Grammys and made very popular Broadway musicals like Godspell and Pippin, and would also contribute a number of lyrics to successful musical films like Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Prince of Egypt, when Disney and DreamWorks were both making 2D animated musicals. So he went on vacation, hears about Wicked from a friend, and he immediately runs to his lawyers to investigate who has the rights. And Universal Pictures has the rights to Wicked. We learn actually that a screenplay was in development, but nothing was really coming together. So Stephen Schwartz would meet with a president at Universal Pictures, Mark Platt, and give an impassioned plea to why he should let him use the property for his musical. This worked, and Mark Platt signed on as a producer for the Wicked musical. He would also go on to produce the 2024 film. In this time between 1996 to 2024, Mark Platt has become an extremely famous movie musical producer, producing movie musicals like Into the Woods, La La Land, Mary Poppins Returns, Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, Snow White. He really loves these live action Disney remakes. I'm not sure I see you on those, but I do love La La Land. I also do know him best for being involved in the Ben Platt Nepo Baby scandal because he also produced the Dear Evan Hansen movie with his son Ben Platt as the star. We could talk about that another day. Since Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz recently won an Academy Award for Colors of the Wind, I think it was a little bit easier for Stephen Schwartz to get backing for his project because he was already a well-respected and award-winning lyricist and composer. So they would start working behind the scenes on Wicked. In 2000, Stephen Schwartz would announce to the press that he's writing the music and lyrics for Wicked, and Winnie Holzman is writing the book. Winnie Holzman is a TV writer, primarily writing TV shows like 30-something and My So-Called Life, and she had never written for the Broadway stage at this point. Winnie actually says that she independently read Wicked and inquired about the rights, thinking that it would make a good TV show or movie, but found out that Universal already had it before Stephen Schwartz got the idea to make Wicked into a stage musical. And soon they started workshopping and testing different material. And immediately, some of the darker themes that were in the novel, like the sexual assault, political unrest, infidelity, racism, the role of religion in society, were very much simplified for the musical. The first reading they did was in spring of 2000, and at this point, Galinda was hardly in the musical, following the plot of the book. Some of the earliest songs finished for the musical that would end up in the final product is One Short Day, As Long As You're Mine, and Making Good, which would be reworked into The Wizard and I. And Kristen Chenoweth, Tony-winning actress for portraying Sally Brown in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown on Broadway in 1999, and sitcom star, would join the cast of Wicked in September of 2000. After the TV show that she was starring in was canceled, she was committed to work on Wicked. In an early interview, she said, "I wish I had more to sing, but I took it for the journey that the character takes." And after this, Stephen Schwartz really wanted to compose and write with Kristen Chenoweth's voice in mind, and the character of Galinda became very shaped after Kristen Chenoweth. And it seems like a combination of Kristen Chenoweth committing to the show, also them seeing the potential of Galinda's character, who isn't extremely important in the books, but the relationship between Elphaba and Galinda would soon become the heart of the show. And during this time of workshopping and reading, Stephanie J. Block would be Elphaba. She would later go on to tour as Elphaba in the first national tour of Wicked and become a Broadway legend outside of Wicked and win her own Tony for portraying Cher. And they would do another workshop in March of 2001. At this point, Stephen Schwartz remembers that No One Mourns the Wicked was actually introduced by Madame Morrible and sung by Dorothy, the Tin Man, Scarecrow, and Lion, but then later decided that Galinda should start the show and sing that song instead. So in the summer of 2001, director Joe Mantello would join the project, and they would start new auditions in New York City to cast for the potential Broadway musical. At this point, they would cast rising star Idina Menzel as Elphaba. Idina was most known at this point for being a supporting character in the cult classic musical Rent as Maureen Johnson, a gay icon. The casting directors really liked the precision and control that Kristen had, while the rawness that Idina had, and felt like they made really good counterparts to each other. Idina Menzel talked about being very excited to audition for Wicked, and she put on green lipstick and green blush when she auditioned. But the show would need extensive workshopping before it was ready to be presented on stage. They would say that when they presented just the first act, it was almost 3 hours and it just needed to be cut down. They do mention in Stephen Schwartz's biography that the author of Wicked, Gregory Maguire, would go to one of the workshops and he would say, "Even though I had several reservations, my overall appreciation for the work was profound and genuine." Winnie Holzman would also say that after they finished reading the novel, they put it away because as brilliant and powerful as the book was, it wasn't what we needed to make the musical. And she would come up with the idea of bringing Oz to life by having their own slang like confusifying and hideous. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some changes that happened throughout the workshop. These are mostly taken from Stephen Schwartz's biography, Defying Gravity, and Wicked, the Grimmery. So in an earlier version of the script, Elphaba Fierro and Dr. Dillamond do research into the animal oppression and sing a song, As If by Magic, which echoes a scene in My Fair Lady. And this was pulled out of the book from Elphaba's research group with Bach and his friends. And Fierro was completely reimagined from this tribal prince to this frat boy prince with Adam Garcia in mind for the role. At first, when Fierro was introduced, he would sing the songs Who Could Say No to You and Easy as Winky a Wine, but both were cut in place of Which Way's the Party, which would be a big dance number for the students at Shiz. Stephen Schwartz basically describes this section of the Fierro song as the most difficult part of the creative team for them to land on what they should do here. The creative team also had a lot of trouble with the animal oppression subplot, and this also caused a lot of friction. It seemed like some of them were even in favor of removing the animal subplot altogether. Stephen Schwartz would say, frankly, we tried to get rid of it because it's confusing. But so much of the plot hinges on it. That was the biggest thing for us to solve, figuring out how that could be done without bogging the whole thing down. There were some other songs that were cut, like Elphaba would sing an I'm Limited reprise when she sees Dr. Dillamond and he's unable to speak. They did go through a lot of different ideas for what to do with Dr. Dillamond's storyline. In the book, if you remember, he's killed. So in the original workshop, I think he was also killed. But later on, they got this idea that he explodes in this like lab explosion. I don't really understand this because isn't he a history teacher? But he gets exploded in a lab explosion, like disappears. They think he's dead. They have this long funeral scene that's about 8 minutes long that Stephen Schwartz really wanted to cut, but the director really wanted to keep. Also, this is the first time that Elphaba's seen wearing a black dress, which was an important part of her character, you know, forming the Wicked Witch of the West character design. So they wanted this symbolic moment where Elphaba wears a black dress for the first time at Dr. Dillamond's funeral. Stephen Schwartz said, who cares? She wears a black dress one day, and that's what's going to happen. She'll be wearing one when she goes to Emerald City, or she's got that hat, and now she's got a dress to match the hat. I don't care why she's in black. I'm not going to give you an 8-minute funeral scene just so she can show up in a black dress. And they would also cut 2 songs sung between Galinda and Elphaba, Bad Situation and Far Be It From Me. And then there was problems with copyright. They were very passionate about wanting the red shoes in the musical, but they couldn't because those are owned by the MGM film. So they do have silver slippers like the book in the musical. There is a scene where the red light shines on them and kind of gives that illusion that they're reflecting red. They also had to make a lot of line changes because they made a lot of jokes about the 1939 film by Galinda, but unfortunately those had to be cut because of copyright reasons. Stephen Schwartz talks about how sad he felt telling Christian. He said, she didn't have big songs in the same way that Adina did, but what she had were some great scenes and really funny lines. And suddenly her 2 funniest scenes were going. We had a list of lines that the lawyers for Universal made us cut, or they were going to close the show. She had somewhere between 6 and 10 giant laughs that had to go. So finally in 2003, they would decide that they wanted to preview the show off Broadway in San Francisco and test out material with live audiences and make mistakes and learn to try to restructure the show before it went to Broadway. And along with this, they would be designing sets, lighting, doing choreography, costuming, staging. The show was getting this steampunk kind of aesthetic that you see with like Galinda's Bubble and the Wizard and the Time Dragon. They also pulled the idea from the Clock Dragon to be on top of the stage. To produce the show off Broadway and open on Broadway apparently cost $14 million. And the show would start previews May 28th of 2003. But immediately after the first preview, they knew that they had a lot of work to do and pages of notes to restructure the show. The creative team describes this time as very tense, and Winnie and Schwartz were getting forced to make changes from the producers, Mark Platt, David Stone, and the director, Joe Mantello. Winnie would say she had a big stress eating problem during this time, while Mark Platt and David Stone were under eating. 2 of the preview performances had to be canceled because Joe Mantello was making changes. Here are the only known clips I could find from the off-Broadway tryouts.
Someday, when we live in it, we'll have moments like this all the time. Absolutely everyone will wish they were us. Popular. I know about popular. Wizard. Hello.
but here you can see that songs like Popular and The Wizard and I are kept for the Broadway production, and it would get mixed reviews upon opening. They would talk about also different problems that they had when running the show off Broadway, like Fiyero would swing in on a rope, and one time the rope got wrapped around Kristen's neck. And another night, a portable stand with spotlights mounted to it fell on Kristen, and apparently it knocked her out for a moment, but she got up and finished the show. Kristen would really grow into the character of Galinda and invent her own like ad-libs and moments for Galinda, like the hair toss scene in Popular.
Your whole life is going to change, and all because of me. Okay, let me show you how to toss your hair. You just flip it. You just flip it. Or you can use your hand, flip it with your hand. Or, well, use your whole body if you want.
One night, apparently, she overdid it and gave herself whiplash, and for several performances, she wore a bejeweled version of a neck brace. A review of the show at this time says, "The story of two witches in training is well developed and expertly performed. Menzel is sympathetic as an idealistic, serious new student shunned for her skin color. As in the movie, she's Margaret Hamilton's Green. Chenoweth is irresponsibly spoiled, shallow, and vain. And as she warbles sensationally in the show's outstanding number, Popular, their mutual dislike, growing sympathy, flowering friendship, and falling out over a boy, Norbert Leo Butz, as a wonderful party-hardy Fiyero is captivating." For the pre-Broadway tryouts, they would cast Norbert Leo Butz to play Fiyero, another iconic two-time Tony winner who would go on to originate the role on Broadway. But a lot of reviewers still felt like Wicked was off at a shaky start in San Francisco. There was some talk of Kristen Chenoweth's Galinda overshadowing Idina Menzel's Elphaba, and they took steps to make her character more prominent. Some reviewers also felt like there was problems with Elphaba's character arc and the Elphaba-Galinda-Fiyero love triangle, but Kristen Chenoweth would get glowing reviews for her portrayal of Galinda. The creative team also planned to take the summer after the pre-Broadway tryouts closed and before they were scheduled to start previews on Broadway in October to make small changes to the show. There was not any huge overhauls that they need to do to the show, but they still felt like there was problems with Fiyero's introductory song, so Stephen Schwartz would write a new song for this section. Instead of Which Way's the Party, it would be turned into Dancing Through Life. But apparently the director, Joe Mantello, didn't like Dancing Through Life, so this caused a lot of problems behind the scenes with the creative team, and Dancing Through Life was one of the most contested scenes, along with the first 3 scenes in Act 2. It makes sense that Dancing Through Life was causing them a lot of problems because that song, it introduces Fiyero, it starts Galinda and Fiyero's relationship, it starts Elphaba and Galinda's friendship, and it starts Nessa Rose and Bach's relationship, and this sets a lot of plot lines in motion that are resolved later on in the show. Joe felt like they weren't addressing the problems with Elphaba's character and instead were putting like band-aids on different scenes. But during this time, they did recast some of the roles for the Broadway production because they felt like they had a clearer vision of the characters. Stephen Schwartz in his biography revealed that he got so burnt out at this time. In August of 2003, he quit the show and he left a letter for David Stone saying that he was quitting, but then quickly retracted that he was going to quit. And I guess David Stone has this letter framed in his office. And Wicked would finally start previews on Broadway October 8th at the Gershwin Theater, where it's still running today. And about a week before their opening on Broadway, October 30th, they would freeze the show to let the actors settle into their roles. So let's talk about the final frozen version of Wicked that we see on Broadway. The show starts with the Munchkins celebrating the death of the Wicked Witch of the West, singing No One Mourns the Wicked, and ironically, as the Munchkins sing this, Galinda is mourning Elphaba. This is Stephen Schwartz's own twist on Ding Dong the Witch is Dead. Obviously, they couldn't use that song because it's copyrighted, but this is kind of an homage because this song kind of has the same idea. They're all celebrating that the witch is dead. And Galinda reveals that according to the Time Dragon clock, she melted on the 13th hour as a result of a bucket of water. So we know that this is following sort of what happened in The Wizard of Oz. The Time Dragon clock's never really mentioned in the show. I think this was just a little Easter egg. Some of the Munchkins start to question Galinda if she knows anything about Elphaba's past, and Galinda reveals some information about Elphaba's family life, about her mother and father. We learned that her father is governor of Munchkinland, somewhat similar to the book, and her mom is cheating on her husband with a mysterious man with a green elixir. And when a Munchkin asks Galinda if her and Elphaba were friends, then
Galinda starts to think back to when they first met at Shiz, and we transition with the song Dear Old Shiz, basically like a little school song, and Galinda, of course, is showing off. And in this scene, we start to learn a lot about the characters, like Galinda is the richest and most entitled student at Shiz, and they live in a far less formal society. There's no Almas attending Shiz with them. And Nessa Rose is also enrolling in Shiz, and in the musical, rather than being born without arms, she instead is in a wheelchair. And like in the book, their father favors Nessa and gives her these beautiful jeweled shoes as a going away present. And we learn from their father that the only reason he's letting Elphaba go to the school is to look after Nessa and protect her. Originally, Elphaba and Nessa believe that they'll be rooming together, but it turns out that Madame Morrible has private accommodations for Nessa, and Galinda and Elphaba end up having to room together. Elphaba is anxious about not being able to protect her sister, and when Madame Morrible starts to wheel Nessa away, Elphaba has a magical outburst and brings Nessa Rose to her. But rather than being upset with Elphaba, Madame Morrible sees the magical potential that Elphaba has and wants to tutor her. She said she would only take students for her seminar if she saw people with amazing magical potential. And Galinda's immediately jealous because she wanted to get into Madame Morrible's seminar because she aspires to be a sorceress. And Madame Morrible tells Elphaba that being a witch may lead to her dreams coming true, and she may be able to meet the wizard, and he could possibly change her skin color if she asked. And this motivates Elphaba, and she sings the song The Wizard and I. The Wizard and I is a pretty classic I Want song, which is pretty common in musical theater, that shows the character's desires and motivations. These are also really common in especially Disney musicals, because every Disney princess kind of has an I Want song, like Moana's How Far I'll Go or The Little Mermaid's Part of Your World. Another more classical example of an I Want song is Over the Rainbow from the original Wizard of Oz movie, and Stephen Schwartz found a way to make references back to that song in this song by having this unlimited musical motif that shows up in the show multiple times. And this melody incorporates the first 7 notes of Over the Rainbow.
Unlimited. My future is unlimited.
And through this song, we get a better idea of Elphaba's character and understand her better. She's had this magical power her whole life that she hasn't really been able to control, and she's always thought of it as a curse, but now she's thinking it could be a talent. And she feels like working alongside with the wizard, the most respected person in Oz, will help her have her own positive reputation. She says, no father is not proud of you, no sister acts ashamed, all of Oz has to love you, by the wizard you're acclaimed. And at the end of this song, Elphaba gets kind of like a vision, which actually does end up becoming true and is kind of a foreshadowing for what's going to happen in the show. But this is when the Unlimited theme starts to play, and she says,
but I swear someday there'll be a celebration throughout Oz that's all to do with me.
And we know that's No One Mourns the Wicked. And she says, I'll be so happy I could melt. And, the pail of water causes her to melt. And now that Galinda and Elphaba are being forced to room together, they immediately start to hate each other. And they sing this amazing song, What Is This Feeling?, where they both list all of their problems with the other person. Stephen Schwartz mentions that this was the 5th song that he wrote for this scene. Originally, the song was called Bad Situation. And he says early on in the production, all of his songs he wrote had either good, bad, wicked, or better, or something like that in the title, which he later abandoned. And they wanted this really upbeat, hate at first sight song. The original song they had was too slow-paced, and Joe Mantello felt like they needed a more upbeat song for this early in the show. I love this change that they made to the musical with Galinda and Elphaba's characters having this passionate hate for each other, because they have strong feelings about each other from the beginning that then develops into love. But in the book, it was very much like they had a slow burn friendship. It wasn't so much that they disliked each other and had a rivalry. It was more like they just ignored each other and didn't like each other. But this idea that they had a passionate rivalry makes this song really fun. And all of the other students at Shiz are on Galinda's side and hate Elphaba as well. Then we go to them actually in class at Shiz. This is the only class we really see them go to, is Dr. Dillamond's class, and Dr. Dillamond is a goat. He's kind of the only animal character in the musical, I think, that's really that important and has that many lines. And in the book, the animal subplot was
very different because there's two types of animals. Animals with the capital A were the ones that could talk, and then the lowercase a were the ones that could not. They were basically like, if we catch animals before they develop speech, then do they become animals lowercase a, and that kind of thing. And it was campaigned by the wizard, and he was purposefully doing this. But in the Wicked universe, something mysterious is happening to the animals where they're losing their power to speak and also getting some rights taken away, but they don't realize it's because of the wizard. And during the lecture, Dr. Dillman flips over the chalkboard and sees the phrase, "Animals should be seen and not heard," which is just straight up what Madame Morrible says in the book. Obviously, Dr. Dillman's offended by this, and they sing the song Something Bad, where they question what's happening in Oz, and Elphaba mentions to Dr. Dillman that someone needs to tell the wizard about it because maybe the wizard can fix it.
And then Fiyero arrives at school, and he's a mixture of Fiyero in the books and Averick. He has the Winky Prince identity, but rather than being a tribal, dark-skinned prince, he's more of a frat party boy, and he sings the last song written for the show, Dancing Through Life, which replaced Which Way's the Party, where Fiyero sings about how he's not interested in studying and just wants to have fun, and how life is painless when you're brainless, and life is fraughtless when you're thoughtless, referencing how Fiyero's going to become the scarecrow who wishes to have a brain. But in this case, Fiyero enjoys not having to think so much. So they plan to party at the Ozdust Ballroom, and Bach is trying to ask Galinda out, but she wants Bach out of her way because she's more interested in Fiyero. So she manipulates Bach into taking Nessa, saying that he would be her hero if he took Nessa. And Fiyero and Galinda become the perfect Barbie Ken couple. And Nessa talks to Elphaba and tries to tell her that there's a nicer side to Galinda, thinking that Galinda set up her and Bach out of the kindness of her heart and not out of manipulation. And when Galinda and her friends are getting ready for the party, they find this pointed black hat that they all think is ugly, but they start to think, oh, maybe we should give this to Elphaba as a joke. So Galinda gives Elphaba the black hat that becomes the iconic witch hat. But on the way to the party, Madame Morrible tells Galinda that she's been accepted into her sorcery class because Elphaba wanted Galinda to join the class with her or she'd quit. And then Galinda starts to regret how she was making fun of Elphaba. And when Elphaba starts to arrive at the party and everyone's giggling and laughing at her and she's dancing without music, and Galinda realizes that there's more to Elphaba than what she realized and joins the dance along with her. And this starts the friendship between Galinda and Elphaba. And they spend all night talking, which leads into the song Popular, where Galinda tries to give Elphaba a makeover and try to teach her how to be more accepted and popular in society. One of the most well-known songs in the musical, and a chance for the actress who's playing Galinda to show off her comedic skills. It's a very fun, silly song, but it also shows us layers of how the Oz society is and how easily swayed it seems like people are in their society by appearances. But from this point forward, Galinda and Elphaba are best friends. But when they go to Dr. Dillman's class, he's forcibly taken out of the school and fired because animals are no longer permitted to teach. Definitely a little bit better than his throat getting slit, which happens in the book. But a new teacher comes to the class, Dr. Nick-Nick, who has this lion cub trapped in a cage. Elphaba does some magic, allowing her and Fiyero to escape with the lion cub. While setting the cub free, the two of them have a moment. But what about Galinda? Shouldn't Fiyero be with someone like her? Which is what Elphaba wonders while she sings the ballad, I'm Not That Girl, where she's stopping herself from falling in love with Fiyero because she knows he's better off with someone else. But on a lighter note, Madame Morrible invites Elphaba to go to the Emerald City to see the wizard. Galinda changes her name to Galinda as a protest because Dr. Dillman called her Glinda. This actually also does happen in the book. It's such a random throwaway line in the book. Obviously, her delivery is a lot more funny in the musical. But Galinda decides to accompany Elphaba to Emerald City, where they have an amazing fun time. Elphaba and Galinda are happy and feel accepted. They fantasize about moving there together after they graduate and how it's going to be their new home.
Just like now we can say we're just two friends, two good friends, two best friends.
And after an amazing time in Emerald City, they go to see the wizard, and he sings A Sentimental Man, which is about him always wanting to be a father, and he sees the people of Oz like his children, and he wants Elphaba to prove herself and prove that she has magical powers, so they ask her to read a spell in this magical book, the Grimmery. The wizard says this monkey Chissery has always dreamed of flying, and has Elphaba read this spell that allows him to grow wings. But after doing this spell, Elphaba quickly realizes that the wizard is a fraud, and and he's the one behind the suppression of the animal rights, and he's going to use the monkeys as spies. So Elphaba runs and hides, and Glinda chases after her. Madame Morrible announces to Oz that Elphaba is a wicked witch who should be captured.
Her green skin is but an outward manifestorium of her twisted nature. This distortion, this repulsion, this wicked witch!
Causing the Emerald City Guards to come and find Elphaba and Glinda. Elphaba and Glinda start to sing Defying Gravity, where Elphaba realizes how powerful she is, and she's stronger even than the Wizard of Oz, and she doesn't need him. Elphaba and Glinda fantasize about going on this journey together, but both of them know it's never truly going to happen because of what Glinda wants out of life and what Elphaba wants. They're both on different paths, and they sing I Hope You're Happy to each other in a sincere way. This song, I Hope You're Happy, was originally a whole song that Glinda and Elphaba sang, but it was cut down to just a verse in Defying Gravity. Elphaba uses the spell book and causes a broom to levitate, which she rides off on and go to the western sky. She's realizing that she's done chasing other people's approval, and she's going to fight, even if that means she has to fight alone. So in Act 2, we come back to a similar scene we saw in Act 1, where the Ozians and Glinda are all celebrating. The people of Oz are spreading rumors about how wicked Elphaba is and all of her different magical powers, and the fact that her soul is so unclean that water could melt her. But Glinda's trying to focus on the positives. Now everyone sees her as a hero, and she's adored by the public, and she's gotten everything she's ever wanted. But she can't help but feel this is hollow, especially because Madame Morrible and the Wizard are spreading lies about Elphaba that Glinda knows aren't true, and she doesn't want to just stand by and watch as all of this is happening to Elphaba. And between this time, Fiyero has also become captain of the guard, and this event is actually a surprise engagement and party, a surprise to Fiyero, but Fiero's more preoccupied with trying to find Elphaba. And then we see where Elphaba is, and she's visiting Nessa Rose in Munchkinland. Elphaba goes to ask Nessa for their father's help, but realizes that their father died, and Nessa has been stripping Munchkins of their rights so she can keep Bok by her side. We can tell Bok is definitely no longer interested in her, but Elphaba's trying to convince Nessa that she can help her with the animal oppression situation, but then Nessa turns it around on Elphaba and is like, you'd rather help these animals you've never met than your own sister. And she said, why haven't you ever tried to use your spells to help me walk, basically. But now that Elphaba has the Grimoire, she thinks maybe there is a spell that could help Nessa walk. And Elphaba casts a spell on their shoes that their father gave her, and she is able to start walking. She thinks that this is going to change everything, and now Bok will actually want to be with her. But sadly, she's mistaken, and when she tells Bok, then he says, now you won't need me and I can leave. And they sing a song referencing back to what they sung in Dancing Through Life, where Bok tells Nessa that he wants to leave so he can try to stop Glinda and Fiyero's engagement. This immediately angers Nessa, knowing that after all this time, he's still been in love with Glinda and that he's lost his heart for her. And Nessa grabs the Grimoire and starts reading it. And then Bok says it feels like his heart's shrinking and he starts dying. But Nessa begs Elphaba to fix the spell. Elphaba tells her that there's no way that she can reverse the spell, but she can try to do something to save his life. And this leads Elphaba to change him into the Tin Man so he can survive without a heart. In this scene, Nessa also sings The Wicked Witch of the East, which is a song that's not on the soundtrack, and Elphaba flees to the wizard's chambers. So when Elphaba's there, she's searching for a way to free all the monkeys. When she's there, she runs into the wizard, and the wizard tries to get Elphaba on his side, and he sings the song Wonderful, where he basically says that it's all a matter of public perception.
Man's called a traitor or a liberator. A rich man's a thief or philanthropist. Is one a crusader or ruthless invader?
The citizens are always seeing things in black and white and picking a side, and Elphaba agrees to help the wizard if he frees the monkeys, and he does free the monkeys. But after this, Elphaba discovers Dr. Dillamond is there, and she turns to the wizard and realizes that she can't work with someone like him who has no morals, and tells him that she's going to fight him until the day she dies. And knowing the wizard can't fight her alone, he calls the guards, but surprisingly the one that hears the commotion is actually Glinda. Glinda goes to investigate and rushes to embrace Elphaba, but But then when she realizes that Fiyero is intending to leave with Elphaba, she starts to break down and sings a reprise of I'm Not That Girl. Definitely a different vibe than Elphaba singing it, because Galinda's who you'd never expect to feel this way. Her realizing that Fiyero would want Elphaba over her causes her a lot of distress, and when the wizard and Madame Morrible are trying to find a way to trap Elphaba, Galinda suggests that they should spread a rumor about Nessa Rose being in trouble, which would cause Elphaba to go see her. But Madame Morrible and the wizard feel like just a rumor might not be enough, and maybe a storm would do the trick. And we know Madame Morrible's specialty is weather, and after the sad I'm Not That Girl, a mysterious foggy clearing where Elphaba and Fiyero meet, singing a sensual song As Long As You're Mine to each other, very much pulling from their passionate love affair that they had in the book, and a chance for Elphaba to say that for the first time she feels wicked. But then Elphaba starts to get a vision of a house flying through the sky and something being wrong with Nessa, and flees and leaves Fiyero behind. And we see Galinda just after she's seen Dorothy and sends her along on the yellow brick road. Elphaba rushes to Munchkinland to see what happened to her sister, and indeed a house did fall on her, which is so tragic. She finally was able to walk, and then she gets killed by a house. But Galinda then sends Dorothy, who we only see off stage, to go down the yellow brick road to see the wizard, and Dorothy took the shoes that Nessa was wearing. Although they initially are both mourning Nessa, Elphaba and Galinda start to fight each other and slap each other before the guards rush in, and Fiyero sacrifices himself to allow Elphaba to escape. And Fiero's tied to a cross and is somewhat crucified, but Elphaba starts to do a spell to try to save his life, which leads into No Good Deed, another solo that Elphaba sings, where she first sings about trying to save Fiero's life, trying to do anything possible to stop him from bleeding and feeling pain. But then throughout this song, she realizes that no good deed goes unpunished. Everything she's tried to do in her life to please others and help others has only backfired, and people have only blamed her for the bad things, and she doesn't get any credit for the good that she's done. At this point, she's just over seeking people's approval and trying to do things that help other people when everything that she does is misinterpreted by people anyway. Nessa has died, Dr. Dillamond is unable to speak, and Fiyero may be dying. She feels like everyone she's tried to help in a way has ended up worse. And a great song where she's becoming the villainess, the Wicked Witch of the West. Which leads into March of the Witch Hunters, which has the same tune as No Good Deed, where a mob of Ozians are singing about wanting to kill Elphaba. The mob is led by Bok. Two of the good deeds she tried to do, like saving Bok's life after Nessa was about to kill him, and rescuing the lion cub, has come back to haunt her. I guess at this point they cross paths with Dorothy, probably. Because we then cut to Fiero's family castle in the Vinkus, with Dorothy captured because Elphaba's trying to get the diamond slippers off of her. And unexpectedly, Galinda arrives there. Elphaba receives a note from one of her flying monkeys, says that they've seen Fiero's face for the last time. This kind of implies to Galinda that he's dead, but Elphaba knows that she did a spell to transform him. And Galinda and Elphaba realize that they only really have each other at this point. Elphaba asks Galinda to carry on her work after she's gone and to never try to clear her name. Then they start to sing the song For Good, which has a great double meaning of the phrase for good, as in forever, and also good opposed to evil. In this song, Galinda and Elphaba forgive and apologize and thank each other for their friendship that they had. And Elphaba gives Galinda the Grimoire, even though she can't read it. Stephen Schwartz got the real-life influence for the song from asking his daughter what she would say to her best friend if she could never see her again. And this message does come across very well in the song. You can tell that Galinda and Elphaba love each other, and they're putting all of their transgressions aside to say goodbye to each other for one last time. They hear footsteps approach, and Galinda goes to hide, and Elphaba, realizing that she has no way out of this situation, allows a bucket of water to be thrown on her from Dorothy and melts, and leaves behind only Elphaba's black hat and a small green bottle. Galinda knows what this bottle is because in Popular she asked her about why she kept a bottle under her pillow, and she knows it was left behind from her mother. Galinda makes the connection that the only other place that she's seen this bottle before is from the wizard, so she goes to confront the wizard about it, and in a horrible twist of fate, the wizard, who is a sentimental man who always longed to be a father, ended up killing his own daughter, and Galinda threatens that he needs to take an indefinite leave of absence and to get his balloon ready, and also calls the guards to arrest Madame Morrible. Madame Morrible and the wizard gone, Galinda is now the ruler and has the role of leading the people of Oz down a path of good. And in the finale, they bring back the music from No One Mourns the Wicked. But during the finale, we learn that Elphaba and Fiyero are still alive and they're planning to leave Oz and never return. And Fiyero is now the Scarecrow. So actually, Elphaba didn't die, but rather faked her death to get a chance to escape because she knew she could never live in Oz in peace.
I think Wicked is totally mediocre.
So despite Wicked being such a beloved fan favorite musical, it actually got quite mixed reviews. For example, The New Yorker wrote, Winnie Halsman, who wrote the Crisp book, seems to have had more fun with this project than most of her collaborators. She has invented a handful of malapropisms, confusifying, discoverate, hideodious, to send up the sanctimonious Galinda, borrowed some of the film's classic lines to good comic effect, and told the intricate story with a modicum of flair, but the same cannot be said for the score. The show's 21 songs were written by Stephen Schwartz, and not one of them is memorable. If someone wrote that about my work, you'd never hear from me again. And Wicked would be nominated for 10 Tony Awards and end up winning 3 of them, for Best Actress in a Musical for Idina Menzel, Best Scenic Design for Eugene Lee, Best Costume Design for Susan Hilferty. And this does show that awards are not necessarily important for long-time success and cultural importance. The relevance of The Wizard of Oz was able to propel Wicked to success, give the show international appeal and success. It drew a lot of a younger fan base who really connected with the characters of Galinda and Elphaba. The show would win quite a few Drama Desk Awards, which is another prominent theater award show. They would win Best Musical, Outstanding Direction of a Musical, Orchestration, Set Design, and Costume Design. But at the Tonys, they wouldn't get the most coveted awards for new musicals, Best Musical, Best Book of a Musical, and Best Original Score, which would all end up going to Avenue Q. So most non-musical theater fans might be surprised that Wicked didn't end up winning Best Musical. And Wait in the Wings actually has a great video about the fight for the 2003 to 2004 Broadway scene. There's also this documentary, Show Business, The Road to Broadway.
You're doing readings and workshopping a new show. You never know when the money might fall out or something will happen. The creative team won't, someone will get another job. It's rare you see something make its way all the way through to the Broadway stage.
That shows 4 very different musicals' journey to make it to the Broadway stage. There was Taboo, the musical written by Boy George about his life and early career. There was Carolina or Change, a original musical about a Black woman named Caroline who works as a maid for this Jewish family in the 1960s Louisiana. There is Wicked, which, There is Avenue Q, a musical comedy featuring puppets, and the Show Business documentary is very fascinating because all of these shows are having different problems.
No, that's okay. That moment is almost dangerously, perilously close to being so incredibly inauthentic that it's frightening.
It seems Rosie O'Donnell's Broadway show was too taboo for Broadway. The musical is closing February 8th.
And trying to get funding and trying to stay on Broadway and making it to the awards to hopefully secure funding to keep their show running. And unlike the Wicked team, which was full of experienced people, the Avenue Q team was definitely the underdogs. Jeff Marks and Robert Lopez were making their very first musical.
Oh my God! Whoa! It was Boy George, and we're next door to him, and we're gonna be up against him for Tonys. Wow.
In the documentary, it's very cute seeing how wonderstruck the creative team of Avenue Q is getting their first big break, contrast with the Wicked team, who is jaded industry professionals who do seem kind of money hungry.
And I will not be going to the opening night of Wicked. I will be in Vermont What we're most excited about is that our advance is growing and growing, and the word is spreading, and people seem to be embracing the show in a way that the numbers just keep climbing and climbing.
So Avenue Q winning this award was very important for the show because unlike Wicked, who we see didn't win Best Musical but still running 20 years later, Avenue Q needed backing from awards like the Tonys to be able to keep the show running. And after winning Best Musical, Best Book, and Best Score, the musical continued to run for 6 years on Broadway and ran off Broadway in New York for another 9 years, which would not have been possible without them winning the Tony. This has also paved the way for Robert Lopez to be one of the most successful songwriters of our generation and became the youngest person to win an EGOT. Has also won not just one of everything, but 2 of everything. So he has like a double EGOT. And he would go on to write for huge musicals like The Book of Mormon and Frozen. Also, Idina Menzel winning the Tony Award for Best Actress in 2003, him winning Best Original Score, and then 10 years later, them going on to make Let It Go together for Frozen, Robert Lopez and his wife writing the lyrics for that song. I know people will probably say award shows shouldn't be so political, and if Wicked was the best musical, it should have won or whatever. And I'm not even really debating whether Wicked should have won on merit, but unfortunately, awards are very political. I mean, in 1940, when the Oscars gave Judy Garland a sort of made-up award for juvenile actors because she was too young to be nominated for a major category, and that was presented to her by Mickey Rooney, her onstage love interest, and another popular actor at MGM. And I'm not saying she didn't deserve the award, but do you think that would have happened if Louis B. Mayer, one of the executives at MGM, wasn't the creator of the Academy Awards? Think about it. So I also do want to talk a bit about the Broadway legacy that Wicked has. It opened in October 30th of 2003 and is still running 20 years later, 8 shows a week, weekend matinees, no show Monday. It's also the second highest grossing musical, only behind The Lion King, and is currently the 4th longest running musical of all time on Broadway. And not just on Broadway, but they've done countless shows in the West End, national tours, international translated shows. Also, many Tony-winning and Tony-nominated actors and actresses have passed through the roles in Wicked, like Lindsay Mendez, Megan Hilty, Annalee Ashford, Aaron Tveit, Andy Karl, and Derek Klena, and many other popular actors have gone on to play those roles. Taye Diggs, Idina Menzel's husband and co-star of Rent, would play Fiyero for a limited time. In Stephen Schwartz's book, he also mentions a lot of the original cast members of Pippin would go on to play the Wizard at different times. It's also had just such a big influence on the Broadway community. It's referenced in musicals like Bring It On and The Book of Mormon. There's even that 2009 episode all about Kurt and Rachel fighting over who can sing Defying Gravity better. Also, both Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel played recurring characters on Glee. The show has also had a very large online recording community, if you know what I mean, throughout the years. Everyone loves to see the different interpretations that different actresses have of Glinda and Elphaba, and there's so many like Wicked compilations, Wicked goofy moments, Wicked mistakes compilations, and even comparing all the different Elphaba's riffs and all of the different Glindas. I feel like that's been a pretty big community of people online for a long time. Also, quite a few of the Broadway cast members have vlogged their experience working on Wicked. For Elphaba, Lindsay Mendez and Mary-Kate Morrissey have vlogged. Derek Klena and Lindsay Mendez played opposites of each other in Dogfight, and it was really cool to see them transition from Dogfight to playing opposites of each other in Wicked. I love when actors do that. Also, Cara Lindsay would vlog. She played Catherine Plummer in the original cast of Newsies, Amanda Jane Cooper, and the Madame Morrible Cheryl Lee Raff, and Fiyero Jonah Platt would all vlog their experiences as well. I would definitely recommend checking these out if you're into wanting to know what happens behind the scenes on Broadway and a peek behind the curtain. Definitely a lot of theater kid energy, though. Also, quite a few actresses have rose to prominence for portraying Elphaba, like Jackie Burns, Stephanie J. Block, and Wilhelmine Verkuyk. I was trying to figure out just how many people have played Elphaba and Glinda on Broadway now, or even worldwide, and it's so hard to tell just because so many people have passed through the role. This user Ozdust Broom on Time.graphics made these cool charts showing the timelines for Broadway Glindas and Elphabas, and even the West End Glinda and Elphabas, and Fieros and Dr. Dillamans, and I would definitely recommend checking those out if you want to see more about all of the people who have donned the pink and green. So that's basically a recap on the Wicked musical and its journey to Broadway. It's such a really fascinating show. I think it's become even more special to people and the Broadway community just because of how much they feel seen in Defying Gravity and lyrics, and how much life all of the different actresses have brought to Galinda and Elphaba. Galinda and Elphaba have also become such iconic dream roles for so many people. Wicked just has such a long, interesting legacy, and it's interesting how it's interweaved with the Wizard of Oz legacy, because I don't think Wicked would have the success without the backdrop of the Wizard of Oz as like a reference point for most people who go into seeing Wicked. But like at this point, I feel like my entire life I've basically seen Wicked as like Wizard of Oz canon, even though I know some people don't like that. Even people in my last video are commenting they felt like Wicked distorted L. Frank Baum's original vision, and in a way I can see that just because the book is so mature and different than the Wizard of Oz universe. But the Wicked musical, even if it's not your favorite, there are some great elements and great songs that came out of it. I love Act 1 of Wicked especially. I do think in Act 2 the story kind of falters a little bit, but I have hopes that they could fix the problems with Act 2 in the movie. So thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know all of your Wicked thoughts. No. Let me know all of your thoughts on Wicked, and I'm really working hard to try to make YouTube a potential job for me. So anyone who watches, likes, subscribes, comments, it's really helpful to me, and I want to thank you guys so much. See you next time. Bye.